Well, hey, welcome back to our program. I want to tell our listeners we'll be in St. Louis, the Clear Channel Studios in St. Louis, Missouri, next weekend, broadcasting our show. Now, I've got to admit to you, I'm going up to a class reunion is where I'll be for this Friday and Saturday. We'll stay over Sunday and do the show right there. The Clear Channel folks up in St. Louis have been gracious enough to give us their studios and their lines, so we'll be broadcasting same time live on the program. By the way, Reverend Pat Robertson sure stirred up a hornet's nest this week. Reverend Robertson, who hosts the 700 Club television show, one of the better known televangelists in this country today, said something involving Alzheimer's. Now let me tell you about Pat Robertson. Back in the 80s, he ran for president back in 1988 when George Bush Sr. was elected president. Very contentious race, and it started off as a strong contender in that election. Very well known then, reputation more enhanced then. He said some controversial things in recent years that maybe have turned somebody off, but he's still a very important religious voice, Christian religious voice in this country. Well, a caller came in on the Pat Robertson 700 Club this last week and said that apparently the spouse had Alzheimer's. The spouse did not even recognize the loved one, and they were asking Reverend Robertson's opinion as to whether it was okay to get divorced. And Reverend Robertson jumped into the controversy and he said, well, let's see, he says, he says, it sounds cruel, but if he's going to do something, he'd do something. He should divorce her and start all over again, but make sure she has custodial care and somebody looking after her. And a number of ministers jumped in and said Reverend Robertson is wrong, that you certainly should not divorce your spouse if your spouse has Alzheimer's, saying that, you know, you marry for life, for good and bad, and you're there to support your wife, and it's just wrong to do so. If you don't really know about Alzheimer's, know you've heard about it, but right now, it's a huge problem in this country. 5.3 Americans suffer from Alzheimer's. That number is supposed to go up to 15 million in the next several years. And I'm told that 1 in 7 people over age 65 has Alzheimer's. Half of everyone over 85 has Alzheimer's. It's a growing problem. There is no cure, and it's something that more and more of us and families are going to have to deal with. I had on this show about 6 or 8 months ago a fellow named Barry Peterson. He's an Emmy Award-winning CBS correspondent. His wife was a very first-rate correspondent. I saw her in a number of newscasts. Her name was Jan. Her name is Jan. Jan, at 55 years old, gets Alzheimer's. Very young. And so she gets Alzheimer's and Alzheimer's, you know, the best definition of Alzheimer's probably is that imagine a computer that erases its memory bank, starting with the most recent functions and then deleting backwards. That's what Alzheimer is. You know, you don't remember today, you can remember a long time ago, then slowly just wipes out your memory. Well, in the case of Jan Peterson, Barry wrote a book, very poignant book. The book is called Jan's Story, Love Lost to the Long Goodbye of Alzheimer's. He was on the show, we talked at length, and he said that slowly he lost her. She had no idea who he was, and he'd go to visit with her, and they would talk, but he just became a complete stranger. There was no intimacy, there was no physical contact, just nothing. She just tuned out. And so he struggled with the idea. He said he would never divorce his wife. I think his family, his children, and even his mother-in-law said, look, you've got to have some companionship. You're a young man. Barry's still only in his 60s. The decision he made was to find a companion. He has a companion. I imagine he lives with a companion, and that the two of them together have taken over caring for the spouse, that she's in a home, Jan's in a home, they go to visit her regularly, and that's the way he's and that makes more sense to me if you've got that terrible Sophie's choice about the loved one. So, Pat Robertson, I think you're wrong in this instance. In fairness, I'd like to get Reverend Robertson on the show. I wish he could explain a little bit more. I kind of think it was only a couple of sentences, but having watched Reverend Robertson, I think what he meant was, look, it's a decision if you need to make that. He's not going to condemn you or if you decide to divorce your spouse. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't think anybody would do it. I'm going to let everyone make their own decision. But I think you ought, the caregiver idea that Barry Peterson suggests is a good idea. I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to ask Barry Peterson to come on the show either next week or the following week to talk about an update on Jan, how his book is being received, and the whole idea of Alzheimer's and the tremendous growing problem that we have to face with in this nation. Hey, Jim Brown here on Jim Brown's Common Sense. Be right back with you right after this message.